Eddie Graham, he had a very good mind for the business. As a human being, he was a piece of shit, because I saw him do things you know. But as a worker, yeah, very good mind, and he had a good run, and but he didn't have a good ending.
No, there's a lot of rumors floating around why he killed himself. Do you have any idea?
I think at the time they said he had a girlfriend. Well, he'd fly his airplane drunk. I mean, drunk. He even asked me and I forgot who it was, Tarzan Tyler, I think, one night to go back home with him, because it got to where nobody wanted to get in a plane with him, And he had a nice airplane. He was making a lot of money, but I heard he had a problem with a girlfriend. He was separated from his wife or divorced, I'm not sure. But he killed himself on his ex-wife's bed.
Are you surprised that his son also ended up killing himself?
No, it didn't surprise me. His son, last time I saw him was probably 5 or 6 years later. I was in the same car with him doing a trip. He had what was it? I think it was $600,000 check that he just had collected, that his dad had invested land in Florida. He made a lot of money, a lot of money. And there was some kind of land that was with the sheriff's boys ranch in Florida, and somehow he had part of it or all of it, I'm not sure. But it was a Boy Scout thing in the summer.
Okay.
So, and I guess it got sold and his son got it. So with all that money, he still was not happy,
Yeah.
But he was not. He was brought up. He was short, which there's nothing wrong with being short, but he was not his dad. You should never. That's what a lot of people say. Oh well, the dad. Well, you can't equal your dad usually, And it's bad to chase after your dad. It's any business, you should go on your own style, your own. And I think that was one of his problems. He was a good guy. I liked him, though.
His finishes, he was very, very, very detailed in his finishes, almost like Roy Shires was also very detailed in his finishes. And it was really a kayfabe. It was really protecting the business at all times during that period of time, and Eddie Graham was a master of that. And his knowledge and his approach to professional wrestling was perfect. And his personal reputation in Tampa was impeccable. He was like almost godlike in Tampa, and well loved by all the citizens of Tampa and of course of Florida. And so it was quite shocking when he unfortunately committed suicide. There's several theories going around, and one theory was that actually another wrestler, who I won't mention his name, was involved in, and it was real estate development, and they were in the process of, they got some sort of an inside tip that a big freeway was going to be going through, and so they were buying real estate up and doing something illegally with the real estate, and he had got caught at it, and he didn't want to be exposed to the citizens of Tampa and of Florida that he was been caught illegally in some sort of a fraud with real estate, and that because his reputation was impeccable and he was so highly respected, I think that was one of the major theories, that he just couldn't face, because he was certainly going to prison for this offense if this was the actual offense. So that was one of the major theories that was out there, that he just was not going to go to prison.
Were you actually booking in Florida during that run that you had there with Eddie?
I did go down there as the booker in 19 I think it was 84.
And what was that experience like?
Well, I went down there under strange circumstances because he was looking for a booker, and I think Eddie and Jerry Jarrett were kind of good friends, or were friendly enough. And Eddie told him, do you have anybody there that would be interested or possibly capable of coming down and helping book the territory? And Jerry suggested that I might be a good candidate for it. So I remember flying down there one day, and Dory Funk was the booker at the time, but he was leaving.
Yeah.
And Dory picked me up at the airport and took me over to the office, and I sat down and talked to Eddie. It was a job interview.
Right.
I sat and talked to Eddie for like an hour and a half, and he was just checking me out to see if my philosophy of the wrestling business kind of agreed with his, and I guess it did. And then I went down there. But at the time, Dusty Rhodes had just left Florida to go to Mid-Atlantic, to go to Charlotte with the Crockett's. And what he did, he gutted the territory.
Okay.
He took Kendall Wyndham, Barry Windham with him. He took Ivan Koloff, who was, he took him. And he took a bunch that were big stars. And of course, Dusty left. He was the big star. But all of a sudden, all the big stars that they had been watching on Florida TV, if I'm a fan, and all of a sudden, there's no Dusty. And all of a sudden, there's no Barry Windham. And all of a sudden, there's no Nikita Koloff. And all of a sudden, there's not this guy or that guy. He gutted the territory, so when I went down there, I didn't want to push the reset button, but it was already pushed. It was almost a do-over.
Right.
I had to start from basically scratch and trying to get over people who weren't over before, or just new people. And then Michael Hayes joined me a little later and brought the Freebirds in, which helped. But actually business, I think I went down there in September 1984.
Right.
Excuse me. I left 6 months later because it was, I was working like 80 hours a week. And booking's more thinking than it is anything else. Plus I was wrestling too. So I was just, after 6 months, I was burnt.
There's so many theories out there on why Eddie decided to kill himself.
A lot of theories.
I think it was Kevin Sullivan that told me that it runs in the family, I guess because of Mike, and I guess someone else in the family had also killed himself. But
well, yeah, his grandson killed himself.
Oh, even the grandson has killed himself.
And his son, Mike, killed himself.
Yeah.
With a gun, I think.
So do you think there was I've heard there's a real estate deal that may have gone bad, he may have had to do some prison time?
That was the rumor that was set, that some real estate had some shady background to it. And he thought that would be brought out and he would be embarrassed. Because Eddie worked his whole life Eddie came from a very, very poor background. And it was a little town above Chattanooga. I think it was called Dayton, Tennessee, was where he came from, I think, or around there. But he came from a very, very sparse and tough upbringing. And when he got to Florida, he wanted to be well respected. And Eddie Graham was well respected in the state of Florida because he was a big booster and supporter of the Boys and Girls Club. And people respected Eddie. And I did hear that it could have been a real estate deal that went south. And I heard a few more things. I can't remember what it was, but business actually wasn't that good at that time because Dusty, like I said, Dusty had left, taking the territory. So, and I don't know who else was. I think Hiro Matsuda owned a part of it. I think Buddy Fuller still owned a part of it. It was what I call the Southern Mafia of the wrestling business. You know, they were connected in Florida and Atlanta and different places, in Alabama too, and Tennessee.
And I guess Eddie also had a bit of a alcohol problem. Kevin was telling us that he would fly drunk sometimes and do some crazy stuff when he was under
Well,
the-
when I was there, I don't think he had so much of a gambling problem, but when I saw him, he always looked really tense.
Is it true that Eddie Graham would fly his plane drunk from time to time?
Yeah, yeah. Eddie was at one time, and then Eddie was sober for 13 years. But I mean, the Funks told a story about when he flew underneath the Skyway Bridge, and he was drunk. So, I mean, Eddie was daredevil. Eddie only went to like the 5th grade, but he was a pilot. He was a captain of a boat, and he was a brilliant man in the wrestling industry. But like the rest of us, he had some demons, and he got cured of the demons or stopped anyway for 13 years. And me, Kern, and Mike were on a boat one day with Eddie, and we were fishing, and we were shotgunning beers, the 3 of us, and he said, "Let me try one." And he shotgunned the beer. Now, I don't know if he had been drinking before that, but that was the first time I ever saw him take a drink. And then, you know, progressively, it kind of took back over on him.
Why did he die, do you think? What was there's so many stories that
So
circulate.
many stories, and I think there's a little bit of truth to all of them. He got caught up with the wrong people. Sometimes smart people can think they're the smartest and no one can con them. Well, he got caught up with a con guy that got into the political scene that had somebody in the planning department that told him, buy this property because I-4 is going to be extended. If it wasn't I-4, it was 495, can't remember. And when that happened, Eddie had dumped a lot of money into it. And then all of a sudden, there was rumors that the guy that gave him the information got thrown out of his job because he was giving inside information. And Eddie thought he might be going to jail. And, you know, Eddie was thought of in the state of Florida as, you know, Mr. Florida. And the other thing was financial problems, women problems, and
There's a lot going on.
yeah, and he might have had health issues because Eddie's physique changed now. It could have been from the drinking, but it's a sad thing. It ran in the family. A lot of people don't know this. Eddie's father committed suicide. Eddie committed suicide. Mike's son committed suicide. I just found out Eddie's brother committed suicide, but he had terminal cancer. And then Mike, so, you know, there may be a suicidal gene or depression. They found out there's a depression gene, so.
It didn't get a huge amount of mainstream publicity when Mike killed himself.
Right.
Did you have any insight into what was going on with Mike since you were close with him?
It was a funny thing that happened. Mike and I had been very close at times. When I was tag team with Mike and we had to lose, I would be the one that took the fall. And Mike didn't like that all the time, but he was going to be there. It was going to be his company someday. So when I left Florida and went to different territories, like Atlanta and Knoxville and San Francisco, Mike would come out and do jobs for me. So we were close, and we rode together, partied together, we fished together, dove together, and he had a radio show, and I was his last guest. And after the show, we hung up. Mike was not an outgoing guy with his affection. And after that radio show, he called me up and said, you know, I love you. And I said, what? He said, you know, I love you. He said, and I said, you know, I love you too, Mike. He said, no, I love you. And he hung up. And I'm gonna say it was like 6 days later, he committed suicide. And it shocked me, And I should have not been shocked because he said something that, and General Briscoe and I were talking today at the Fan Fest. After Mike's son died, he said to Briscoe and me and his friends, I must have been a horrible son and a horrible father. And Mike went downhill after the son died. I mean, he wasted away to nothing. At one time, Mike had the longest powerlifting record in the state of Florida, 195 pounds. And I know for a fact Mike was clean back then. I mean, no steroids. And he bench pressed 440, which was unheard of for a 195 pounder for a state champion. And that lasted about 18 years. But when I saw him the last time, he was probably maybe 160 pounds, maybe.